too. We don't think that he's anti-crypto or anti-blockchain. We're not sure who exactly he's answering to, but he seems very satisfied to leave the industry and in a kind of a state of limbo where he hasn't. I don't know if he's playing Hamlet or there's somebody else calling the shots, but we've been waiting for a long time.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that I've been using since 2018. Uphold has all the top cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and all the altcoins. In fact, they have 260 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform. You can also trade precious metals, stable coins, and 37 fiat currencies. In addition, they are available in over 150 countries. And this platform is fully reserved. They do audits, so you can trust that your funds are safe, no commingling, no lending out your funds. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Gerard Scimeca, who is the co-founder and chairman of the Consumer Action for a Strong Economy, which is a free market-oriented consumer advocacy organization. Gerard, it is awesome to have you on the podcast.
Tony, thank you. I really appreciate getting a chance to talk to your audience and talk about crypto and everything that's going on with the markets there.
Yeah, so the Consumer Action for a Strong Economy has been doing a lot of great work. And I recently noticed the ad you ran about SEC Chair Gary Gensler and FTX. And look, there's a lot of people frustrated with Chairman Gensler and the SEC and how they're handling the markets. But before we get to that, I would love for you to tell us about yourself and tell us about the Consumer Action for a Strong Economy.
Sure. I grew up in South Jersey. First job was toting the afternoon newspaper, which I don't think exists anymore, every day. And for the 80 houses or so on my street. And, I'd read the paper as I was delivering it, come home every day, covered it. I looked like a coal miner. And I was just so excited. I thought I was going to go into journalism because I just love the idea of, news events and reporting and writing and everything. When I was in school later on, I noticed that, the news tended to be slanted a particular way. With Dan Rather, Sam Donaldson, those kind of guys. Grew up during the Reagan era, and a lot of great stuff was happening. But he just everything from anything they would blame him for everything from. I remember there was an issue once where there was a problem with some pajamas that were flammable, and Brian Gumbel. So it's crazy. You have a lot of, say, left-leaning activist types in the media, and back then it was pretty tame compared to the way it is today.
Sure.
But so I decided to work in elected politics. I did a lot of federal and state elections as a campaign manager and consultant in about half a dozen states for a while. And then that was a little bit frustrating because you would work with someone who started off with great ideals, sitting at their kitchen table, planning, their campaign, and they would get elected. And then all of a sudden the machine would swallow them up and they would be voting for things that you campaigned against. So I decided to switch more to advocating for issues because they will never let you down. And for underlying principles, especially for our core freedoms, which most of are largely based on economics, our economic freedom to, invent, invest, risk. And that's exactly, where, America shines is people have the opportunity to rise up and down, of course. And so where you see most consumer groups, like say we're the anti-Ralph Nader, to an extent, they're consumers or victims. They need the government to step in all the time. Now, there was a time when consumer advocacy was quite noble. JFK had the Consumer Bill of Rights, basic things like security, information, right to be heard. And, it's great. You say, hey, maybe 10-year-olds shouldn't be throwing lawn darts at each other.
Right.
And then it's like, well, maybe kids could have bicycle helmets. Okay, that's it. Now they're changing the light bulb in our house and our stove and the car we drive, and they're just, like anything else, government grows with weeds. They don't produce anything, so they have to produce something, and it's regulations and laws, and it's to their power and control. So we stand for free markets. We stand for innovation, invention, and investment, and for companies to where you just have the almost at every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to the internet to transportation. There's no area where the government is not interceding or the weeds aren't growing, and so consumers, we're all consumers, and our economy is 70% of our economy is made up on consumer spending. And as all we are all consumers, what do we want? We want good products, better products, competition, choice that lowers prices, and that's what builds prosperity. And so we're pushing up against the I'd say the government interventionism in the consumer space.
Yeah, and there seems to be a theme of big government and overreach from a regulatory standpoint. And like you said, government doesn't produce anything, but it seems like they manufacture a lot of rules and regulations. I don't know how they dream up these things sometimes, but to your point, maybe it's they don't have anything to do, but
they have all day.
Yeah, right. They have all.
Well, if you are the structures of the country are very sound in place. The people come here, flood here, they row here, they march here. So many people want to come to our country just because of it is still the framework of opportunity and economic prosperity is still sound and is foundational to us. And that is solid. So when you build up the government state, we now live in an agency state where unelected people are, of course, making some of the most important rules and laws that control our lives. They have to do something, right? I mean, there were years ago when the government used to pay farmers not to grow crops in order to keep, prices high or enough for people to make a living, so they wouldn't flood the market and everyone, go belly up. And maybe someone has suggested that we pay bureaucrats to stay home or not make laws or give them a Rubik's cube or something. But if you're sitting someplace and you've got a job, you've got to do something. And you're going to go to a cocktail party this weekend, and you've got to be able to brag about some area of the economy that you are now going to put the thumb screws on. So I don't know what goes on in those buildings, a lot of it, but you see everything right now from it was like the Clean Air Act and the FCC and the FTC. Lena Khan is on she decided that all of the rules regarding antitrust don't make sense anymore. She's going to rewrite the rules on that. It's anything that's too big, she's going to go after. They don't like anybody who's making a profit. They want to go after banks, and they want to go after drug makers, and they're going after the automobile industry. And if you're some or car manufacturers, is frustrating because they're making people don't so the market doesn't really show that people want EVs at the current price and at the current technology level, but the government is subsidizing and batteries while they're punishing combustion engines. They're telling Ford that if they're going to make a diesel truck, it's got to get 65 miles to the gallon. Something ridiculous. We're going to phase out fossil fuels. And so what do? If you're a company right now, you're squoze. You can either take the subsidy and get the money, or you could be punished and put out of business. So a lot of companies too, what people don't realize, and not defending every company, of course, but when people, it's so easy to criticize, manufacturers and banks or financial services. But you got to look at the rules the government has set up. They're running a gauntlet. They're just trying to do the best they can. There's a bunch of incentives and punishments for nearly everything. So if there's something that you don't like that a bank or some institution is doing, you can probably look at the government and see that they're the ones that put that in place, because companies want to make money. They want customers. And they do that by serving their customers, not by serving the government. But right now, the biggest customer we have is the government, and that's real shame for holding us back economically and we see it with, and that's what we see with Gensler, with just a very interesting case because when he got appointed by Obama to the Commodities and Futures uh, uh, Commission, his main bullhorn was transparency,
Right.
especially on derivatives, because they were, a real problem with the economy as far as the Jenga log that, caused a lot of the securities to fail. And so now he has Mr. Tight Lips. So he's, not only just sort of really thumbing his nose at everyone, he can sit there in front of a congressional committee, to McHenry and Tamers and sit there and smile and laugh. Uh, it doesn't make a lot of sense because I think, and you've talked about this on your show somewhat too. We don't think that he's anti-crypto or anti-blockchain. We're not sure who exactly he's answering to, but he seems very satisfied to leave the industry and in a kind of a state of limbo where he hasn't. I don't know if he's playing Hamlet or there's somebody else calling the shots, but we've been waiting for a long time. It was like on ESG, he hinted at a bunch of regulations, and what happened, companies spent billions of dollars to hire consultants so they would learn, so they would be able to follow these frameworks. Well, he hasn't followed through on that, and
Right.
he hasn't followed through on, Ripple Labs had been for years going to the SEC and saying, please clarify, what we're doing. And they just brush them off. And then all of a sudden they pounce one day and go, oh, $1.3 billion in illegal securities trading. It's like, this is news to me. And that's awful. And again, it's the kind of thing that not only is he's not doing his job because he works for us, but he's also doing damage to these companies as well as the holders of these tokens. I mean, they didn't do anything. They probably aren't even familiar with Ripple Labs, and they're holding on to this currency. And it's kind of strange. And you think that this is the youngest guy. I think he was 30, and he made partner at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
And Sam Bankman-Fried, which isn't that name just perfect? I'm sorry, Bankman-Fried. It's kind of like Washington sometimes gives you a gift that way, but so he's under 30, or he was 30. I'm not sure if there's some, I don't know, kinship there, but is just very interesting that this is the guy that is, he's picking people's pockets in broad daylight. And Gensler is going after, LBRY and Ripple. And, we just thought that this is very important, not just for this is a growing technology. This is key. America has to be the global leader in technology. And when you have countries like, Estonia and Honduras that are that have better frameworks, are more crypto friendly than the United States, there's something seriously wrong. And so his lack of action and his arrogance and his lack of transparency, it just became too much. And we just thought it was appropriate to just put the spotlight on him because otherwise people don't follow this and they're not going to know. And they're going to wake up one day and there's going to be a currency. Their currency is not going to be, is going to be controlled by, some other nation or some other large, token exchange. And they're going to wind up why they're paying so much more for something. It's just fundamentally not sound economically. And so
Right.
that's what we wanted to get across.
So the ad spot. Now I know you guys have been covering the crypto market and the dynamics of the SEC versus many different crypto companies over the years, different articles and so forth. Is this the first TV spot that you had put together highlighting Gerard Gensler and FTX and all the things that took place there?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes we might do digital ads. I'm not sure we've gotten too involved. So far, we've mostly just done a lot of, I think, coalition building. We've been contacting lawmakers. We've done op-eds, and we've just been trying to highlight, within the DC community, the agencies and lawmakers, that he's not meeting the standards and of the job that
Mm.
he's been charged with. And so this was, but there's been a lot of buildup, and I think that this was appropriate. We tend to run ads now and again. It's kind of a bit of a you know, I'd just say when it gets to a critical mass, and sometimes and I think this is one of those issues that really warranted it.
Yeah, because there's so many layers to this. To your point, going back to the Ripple lawsuit, then the SEC just losing to Grayscale in the appeals court, and those judges saying the SEC was arbitrary and capricious in not approving Grayscale's Bitcoin spot ETF, and now they're going after Coinbase, a company which they greenlighted to go public years ago. So it just seems like a mess. And you have these things happening in parallel. While on the other hand, where was the SEC for Celsius and FTX? I mean, there is documented that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX officials met with the SEC and Gary Gensler multiple times. So what's happening is just a failure to do your job. You're going after good actors and letting the bad actors just run amok. It's just so weird.
Yeah, I can only speculate because I don't know what's in the man's head, but I think there is just what you see with a lot of agencies is almost kind of a territorial power, to where if you are going to flaunt my authority, I'm going to make an example of you, or I'm going to bring you in line, or you're too big for your britches. There's some kind of, it's almost like it's signal sending, saying like, I'm the police, I'm chief around here, listen to me. Which is bad enough, but he has not even done anyone the favor of really communicating. As you said, Hester Pierce wrote a blistering dissent in the LBRY case and just said, she's sitting there watching all this happen with a front row seat and saying this guy is just, randomly destroying these companies. And,
Yeah.
I don't know if they can, they may issue the subpoena at some point. They should. I mean, Emmons has a piece of legislation, and I've never, it's very interesting to me, among setting some certain guidelines for crypto, it removes Gensler from his job. So the bill itself actually, fires him. He's fired through legislation, which is, he seems insulated though. And, we don't know who, do you think Biden is running the country or not? Whoever is doesn't seem to have a problem with what he's doing. I think that they're very happy with, again, what you see at the FCC, tremendous broad overreach. This, digital discrimination is, absolutely nuts. So it goes back to standards of assumption of the discrimination just based upon, statistical numbers and not actual anecdotal or even actual proof or evidence of discrimination. Right. And that is a way of controlling the internet providers. And the FTC is going after Amazon and a lot of people that they're losing in court to, and now the SEC. So anyway, we see the administration right now is just you don't even hear the EPA anymore. They used to be like the big bugaboo because they were like, we're all gonna have to walk around with hats with batteries in them in order to go anywhere. We're all gonna be on segways. But gosh, you don't hear from them anymore because a lot of these financially connected agencies are really just hogging the field right now.
So are the courts the equalizer in the checks and balances of government, where in addition to the SEC, but other agencies, right, that sometimes have
they have to be, because they're not accountable to the people, and that's the real problem with the agency state right now, is that there has just been an enormous amount of delegation and of Congress's legislative responsibilities to these agencies. And the agencies, you give them an inch and they take a hectare and a square mile and whatever it might be. But they're just, you never see an agency say, no, we're not gonna, it's rare, maybe because they're busy doing something else, but they're like, no, we don't want that power. No, that's too much power. We're going to give that back, or that's not our area to go into. That's not typically what they do. They've got budgets, and if they don't use it, you know how that works.
You lose it, yeah.
Yeah, it's something that really needs to be addressed in a serious way, and but it's getting worse and worse, and I think Gensler right now is the poster child for that with
Mm.
what he is unilaterally doing at the SEC.
Now, with regards to the ad that you ran, can you tell us about your plans, for the future? Are you planning to continue to run that ad? And are you planning to highlight any other crypto related initiatives?
We haven't decided yet. We're going to see maybe how things play out because he is on the hot seat, and he does have the attention of a lot of uh, key leaders in Congress right now. We'd like to see if they will move forward or if they'll take action, or at some point he will allocute and tell everyone, maybe what these meetings were about, and more importantly than that, I mean, that's important information to know, but really, I think what the country needs, and especially the financial markets and the crypto holders, are the clear guidelines. I mean, and Congress is doesn't seem ready to. I don't think they know the issue well enough,
Mm.
or that at least there's not enough members that are willing to create a framework. But we could certainly do what some of these other countries have done. The smaller ones that are crypto hospitable is just even set out some basic skeletal structures
Right.
for holders and users, and you can fill in the blanks later. But it's a nascent industry. It's still not even 15 years old, and it really didn't take off. And it's like to about 10 years ago, 12 years ago or so. I think that the was it '09 with the first the Papa John's pizzas. Well, I like in the piece I'm working on it. I did a little research, and it's just funny because you had the automobile, and Teddy Roosevelt was the first president to ride in an automobile, and he hated it. And he was like, "This is just going to contribute to the misery of our lives." And he wanted horses and everything they bring to city streets, and they had the electricity in the White House under Benjamin Harrison, and he wouldn't go near the light switches. He had somebody
Wow.
throw the switches for him. He was so afraid. It's like, it's okay if you die, but I'm not going to.
So is this a bit of to your point, like is it like human behavior changes hard for human, right? From a macro psychological standpoint. And then it just takes maybe a generational shift sometimes, or it just takes some time for the education to roll in for them to adapt to it, right? Because but we did get the internet right. The United States got and that was incredible for us. And I feel like in this global competition that we're in right now with crypto and blockchain, we're seeing a lot of countries, like you mentioned, moving ahead. EU, they passed crypto regulations.
Yeah.
Passed crypto. Hong Kong has opened up, and that's, I feel like a chess move by China, right?
Right, and they're not going to relent in any area. Probably it comes down to, so there was a congressman somewhere where some young person on their staff hit a button and said, "There's email," and he's like, "Oh my goodness, I can talk to my great grandchildren," and they actually could see it work. It had infiltrated our lives. Normally, like we the people, it's the economy and the markets are very democratic. You can take, I mean, there were lots of camera things like the iPhone before the iPhone that failed, and things like, um, digital disc players and all these things. And it's not like the first person who comes up with it is Thomas Edison and everybody adopts it. There's a timing, and then there's a price point, and then sometimes there's great technology people just don't get it. But we determine that, and I think that what's happened is the world, not only here but the world, has adopted blockchain, and it is here to stay, and it's part of our future. It's going to be like 37 trillion dollars in transactions by 2017, and but you have lawmakers, they don't understand it, and I think that is probably one of the fundamental problems with putting together laws and a framework. is they don't know what it is. They don't know what direction to step in.
Mm.
So if you're a politician, excuse me for being cynical here, you're going to say, "What's in it for me?" You know, like if I go this way, or what, how far or how intense or how serious I am, I don't know what the benefit is right now. I really like to focus getting back to banning your gas stove, because that's that'll help get me elected.
So, do you think, though, with all the losses the SEC is taking in the courts, and it seems like that's going to be a continual trend, that that will, raise a level of urgency for Congress that, hey, this government agency and there's a lot of bad PR and a lot of bad optics following the SEC now with these
Mhm.
losses, that it'll, maybe they'll rally the troops together and try to get something through?
It's possible. The other thing is Congress might say the courts are doing our job for us. They are keeping things in check. They're keeping the SEC from going, uh, becoming too extreme and going too far. So let's just sit back and uh, just watch, just eat the popcorn and watch. They should at some point, you'll have some forward thinking people and lawmakers who are I for the members of Congress, and it's got to hit them somewhere. They've got to see it or feel it personally. It seems they just can't seem to wrap their brains around the idea of how important this is. I mean, it is. It's as if the internet was burgeoning everywhere, and we just were saying, I don't know, we should dig up the roads and put in fiber optics. So let's hesitate, because America again is we're just there's a reason we are historically have been the groundbreaking place for it. We invented everything from ketchup to intermittent windshield wipers.
Yeah.
Google, everyone uses Google. Everyone has got Gmail. That's American. People use Facebook. That's American. That's what we did. That's what we do. And that's great. And, other countries have innovated and come up with things. Of course, on our friend from Japan was the Nakamoto with the Bitcoin. Hope I'm saying his name right. And he had an idea. They're very industrious and very inventive. Societies that promote and encourage investment and innovation are going to thrive. And again, it's just absolutely crazy. I'm sure your listeners and the people who are investing and trying to understand this. The lack of clear rules also just freezes people, because you don't know if you're not going to put up a building if the county hasn't said how it's zoned, right? So you're frozen. You don't know what move to make, and if the framework is not set or defined, what you're doing is you're throttling the market, and every day we're losing. That we're not moving forward, and I give a lot of credit to the startups and the holders that are risking and investing right now. Um, Given this, we're still doing pretty well. I mean, as far as like the number of companies started up, I think we still lead, and transactions is we're in the top five,
Hmm.
and which is surprising. I mean, because I personally would be very nervous about getting involved without a clear framework. It's if you plunk down a $10 bill at the store and it's open to interpretation. It's silly, right? I mean, it's so obvious. It's even difficult to talk about.
For sure. And what are your thoughts on, and look, I have a bit of a theory here, and I I I don't want to make sure I phrase this right, because I do believe that there is a bit of an incumbent bias maybe layered in here, like how dare Coinbase come in and start a business and they're making billions of dollars and going public, when Goldman Sachs and BlackRock and these guys are the ones who ruled, these markets, equities, and so forth, making the billions for years. But now we
Right.
see they are throwing their hat in the ring. I mean, BlackRock, I don't think anybody saw that coming. And it was huge. And then you have Fidelity and Charles Schwab and these guys launching a crypto exchange. So clearly they see the benefits. Yet they're not the ones getting sued right now, but the
Yeah,
startups are.
yeah. But there very well could be something to that. It's not unrealistic. I mean, at some point, you after especially the crash in '08, and you saw firewalls being put up between, say, banking and investment bankers, and um, so there might be, that might be an area too where these are products they're offering that are proprietary, and how's it going to impact, but I do trust the markets, though. Overall, I think
Yeah.
that people, especially if you're involved in crypto, and you're typically going to be very well educated about it. And just because big box might be pushing their token, you know um you just never know. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg launched Thread, right, on Facebook, and so far, and that's the most, I guess, heartening thing about our mission, is that we trust markets, we trust people, the democracy of the economy. And I think we'll have to see that play out a little bit more.
Sure.
But for me, having a political background, I would say it's more like who can, make the biggest campaign contributions, who can take so and so's family on, to Hawaii, or get them a small island, or there's so much money at play here, and we don't know what happens behind the scenes. I mean, I'm not trying to, be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but their human beings are very susceptible to incentives. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, well, the key word there is campaign donations, right? And
right.
look, that's a fact. It is what it is. And I could certainly see that trying to slow down a disruptor so that you can catch up, it could be a part of this, but who knows? So how can folks support the consumer action for a strong economy?
Well, if they're interested in these sort of public policy issues, big ones and small ones, they love if they follow us. We're on our website is caseforconsumers.org, and they can sign up and get news updates, and some newsletters and some information. We're pretty active on Twitter. Twitter's a very great place to respond very quickly, to debunk certain things, and also to chime in on, alert, um, the formed news seekers on,
Hmm.
what's going on. So we're pretty simple. It's case underscore for America. So yeah, just please follow us, and stay in touch, and respond, or if they have issues themselves, they can reach out, and uh, uh, maybe point us in the direction of something that they think is not getting the attention it deserves. So just would love to just bring as much information to the table as possible in support of free markets, and U.S. businesses and jobs and everyone's prosperity.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
right.
mean, certainly, I'm a supporter of you guys. Definitely appreciate what
Thank
you're
you.
doing on
Yeah.
behalf of consumers because, yeah, as we talked about at the beginning, we're government overreach and big government, right? And
Mhm.
you got to keep the checks and balances in place. So it's really great. Um, got some wrap up questions here for
All
you.
right.
Favorite food?
Well, despite my light complexion, I would be an apostate if I did not go with my Italian heritage. So, like, man, yeah, anything um, boiled and double baked would be good,
Nice.
covered and smothered.
Favorite musician or band?
I don't want to be a cliche and say Kenny G, so I'm going to Todd Rundgren,
Hmm. Favorite movie?
A Man for All Seasons.
Favorite book?
With Hoosiers is a close second.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Hoosiers is
Hoosiers.
also, yeah.
Um,
You want
favorite.
something made recently, somewhat recently, but
Yeah, check that out. Favorite book?
um, I'd like to say Martin Eden by Jack London, but I wish it had ended differently. I'll go with fiction. I'll go with The Assistant, Bernard Malamud.
Mm.
And nonfiction, probably. Well, a book that was I still refer to today was from an old professor of mine. Michael Novak's Spirit of Democratic Capitalism is really just, if there's is got everything in it, and it just tells you everything need to know about economics, politics, and the culture, and why America's succeeded and other nations have not.
Mm. And what do you do for a hobby or pastime?
When I have free time, I try to work with my three dogs to make them um, good citizens of civil society. So I have a couple of dogs that I fostered, and then I wound up keeping them. And then I saw one on the internet, and he was in a kill shelter in New York, and I was like, "Why did I see that?" So
Yeah.
now, he's with me too. So I've got the three dogs, and yeah, and then I guess sweeping the floor a lot. So those are my hobbies.
Gerard, pleasure speaking with you. Appreciate everything that you
Sure.
said, consumer action for a strong economy you're doing. And love to have you back on in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony. I'd love to be back, and appreciate you focusing on our ad and the work that we're doing on crypto.